So anyhow, I was talking about Bill 570, but I want you guys to go look up in Tennessee. I thought I was looking at hyperbolic when you're talking about Tennessee actually instituting the death penalty for mothers who abort their children. But when I went and looked at it, I saw that the bill actually did specifically state that mothers would be responsible for the death of their children through any kind of abortion. So when I saw that, I'm like, okay, let me go actually look and see what this means. Well, if you look at the Tennessee death penalty statutes, I want everybody to just check with me. The death penalty usually applies very specifically to any death to a child under 12 years old. So when you look at a bill and you look at what they're referring to with other statutes that have already been codified into law, that's exactly what this law does. So then I went and looked at some of the individuals that were doing it. One was Senator Mark Pody, who was the sponsor. Oh gosh, the first name, I had everything up, and I apologize, guys. So I'm going to look at this very quickly as we're going. But when I looked at these individuals, you looked at their religious background, they were also violent election deniers. So you have the same thing happening, right? You have the same people who believe in conspiracy theories also want to go over the line where it looks like their religious leanings are actually part of why they're making these decisions. Now, as many of you know, I was raised Mormon. I was raised very evangelical, very fundamentalist when it comes to actually abortion and pro-life. And even as I ran as a Republican, one of the reasons that I sort of got hit is I kept saying that there needed to be exceptions for the health of the mother, which they said was coding for me being pro-choice, which I have to say in hindsight, I probably am, guys. I mean, I'm to a point that I think that the mother should have the ultimate decision on what happens in her body. Although I do believe there's an argument after a certain amount of time where a child does become a person, right? And that argument I think is based on science, and that's another discussion we can have at another time. What scares me when people are building laws and policy based on religious belief systems, it means they automatically, I think, cross a threshold of not just common sense, but almost into hostile and barbaric acts. Can you imagine a 15-year-old mother? And the reason that I am so specifically very sensitive about this is my sister got pregnant at 14. And had her child at 15, literally a month after she turned 15 years old. And in a Mormon household, as premarital sex or fornication, that was frowned upon, even to the point she was punished by our Mormon hierarchy because she got pregnant at 14. If you go look in the past also, as we're going forward on this, I had this notion, right, as I become, at 55, right, as I've lived this life, my wife and I, and it's a very personal story. I shared on stage at during an actual meeting, that my wife and I lost two children. And if it wasn't for free clinic care, we were 20 years old, 19 and 20. If it wasn't for free clinic care, my wife could have lost her life. And we have three daughters now, but those were two boys that we lost at between 3 and 5 months due to miscarriages. Now, of course, I read the law, they said that if there's any medical intervention or to save the life of the mother, that they wouldn't get the death penalty, right? They wouldn't be prosecuted for murder, which again, as I'm talking to everybody here, I want you to think about, if you read these laws, again, look up the Tennessee legislation, look up the corresponding legislation that it actually applies to. I was sort of shocked, right, that all of this was actually true. Because when I read sensationalistic headlines, I automatically have pushback because I'm like, hold on a second. But this wasn't sensationalistic. Because when you look at the codified legal justifications or arguments, it does talk about that any death for a child under 12 does constitute the death penalty. Now, if you're for the death penalty or not, this is not this conversation. Listen, if you kill a child that's 9 years old and you murder that child and do awful things to that child, there is a part of me who would, and this is another thing, I go back and forth on the death penalty based on the state having that authority, but I also think that anybody who kills a child has a special place in the awfulness. I don't really believe in a hell, but if there was a hell, that's where there would be. When I look at the religious sort of backgrounds of these individuals, that they're Baptist, and what they do, right? So if I type in, and I'm sorry, I had everything up ready to go, guys. I was so excited to do it on my laptop with everything out. You guys know how I like to source all the data. So if you guys look up the bill, what I want you to do is to look at the actual people who did it, right? So as I'm looking through here, Let's see who we got here. There's the text. Here's the thing. Here we go. I told you about Senator Mark Pody, who's the primary sponsor. The person who actually put in the bill is Rep. Jody Barrett. Rep. Jody Barrett ran against Mark Green. If you guys remember Mark Green from Tennessee, his wife divorced him because he had a lurid affair with somebody about 30 years his junior. Mark Green was actually, I came in with Mark Green in the 116th Congress. He actually led the prayer group for the Republican freshmen, which I was voluntold you need to go to these prayer group meetings. I did not. So Mark Green, who led the religious prayer group, got caught in a sordid affair. He's no longer a congressman for Tennessee. Jody Barrett actually ran against him. Mark Pody did not. Mark Pody, I think, is 69. These two are trying to push this bill down the line to make sure that any woman who has an abortion is actually prosecuted for murder. I've warned about this for a long time. Now, is this bill going to get the cross line? I don't know. I guess my warning to everybody here are that there's people out there putting in bills like this. And as we look at religious fundamentalism, where does that take us? I have so many acquaintances that are religious, and we talk and we drink a bourbon together and we do things together. But I'm getting to a point, like if somebody said, "Oh, listen, a mother should be executed or should be prosecuted for first-degree murder because of an abortion," the first I think is how big is this? How big is that umbrella? And does that apply to my 14-year-old sister when I was a child, when I was 16? Does that apply to my wife who was 19? Will we have to prove that her life was in danger? Yes. So if you go and read these bills, I want you just to take a second to try to internalize the danger that religious-based or fantasy-based policymaking has to do and how that actually evolves or how it cascades into the federal government with the Mike Johnsons and things like that also making fantasy or policy-based decisions and legislation. In the legislation that you read in Tennessee, it says, as protected by God. Anyhow, I wanted to just show you guys the background in this, the fact that you have to cross-reference other laws that are actually applicable and why they apply. Um, and I have to say, for me, having 3 daughters, 3 granddaughters, a beautiful wife, the fact that she went through such awful things when we were young, and my sister, and all the people I know, right? When you're talking about premarital sex, fornication, and things like that. So lastly, I want to make a leap, a cascading effect. Should men have the death penalty for not wearing condoms then? And by the way, if religious fundamentalists believes that life begins at erection, I mean, are we to a point, right, that any guy would also be found, shouldn't they be found liable for that specific decision? I mean, I think it's a fair question. What is the man's responsibility in that scenario? And are condoms in Tennessee gonna be required? And by the way, that's gonna be very difficult because evangelicals believe life began at erection, you can't have condoms either. Actually, the person who I ran against here in Virginia believed that birth control was pretty much evil. Evil. Was against birth control. So again, there's a conundrum here, guys. There's a conundrum. Because when you do these type of things, you're not looking at the cascading effects downstream. So my friends, thank you very much for joining me for morning coffee. You're fantastic individuals. Thank you. I can't believe that you guys would join me at 9:15 in the morning. So in the next day or two, we're going to have another breach. I have something else important I want to talk to you about. I ask you guys again, this is a reminder, source your articles. Don't believe hyperbolic leads right off the bat when you're looking at articles. But this one just so happens when you're talking about a Tennessee bill put in by 2 individuals, Jody Barrett and Mark Pody, wasn't even hyperbolic. It was actually even worse than the headlines. So I just see people coming on now. I appreciate you all. I know it's been 4 or 5 days since this information on the Tennessee abortion bill and prosecuting mothers for first-degree murder if they do have an abortion. I ask you guys to go look at the bills, back me up, source it yourself, validate it through the Tennessee websites, look at the corresponding bills, see what the death penalty entails in Tennessee because the death penalty is still applicable in Tennessee. And when you look at the headlines, say, my God, Denver, I'm glad that you sourced it. But my Lord, this might be worse than we can even imagine as we go downstream. So anyway, hey, I love you all. And for the women out there, if you're listening in Tennessee, be careful. But any woman out there, I have to say, to have a wife that's a CEO and a master distiller and somebody who runs our manufacturing supply chains, my wife would certainly kick your ass if she met anybody who thought that anybody should be executed for having an abortion or prosecuted for first-degree murder. Thank you guys very much and have a great day. And thanks for being, and I won't have this sound issues the next time. For being a tech CEO, you think I would have been able to figure that out quicker. Hugs. Love you guys.